Okay, so we're sitting down with Thomas here. First time since the launch of Europa Universalis IV, I think. So perhaps first of all, how was launch and how do you feel about the game that you brought out to the public?
I'm really happy. I honestly think this is our best launch yet. I mean, the reviews were awesome, and if you look around in the team, I think this is the game where team members actually have put in most, and myself included, put in most hours actual gameplay for fun at home. And I think that, I've never seen Crusader Kings 2 was similar, but I think for ourselves, this is the best game we've ever made so far.
More hours, less gray hairs, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, so that takes us to our talking point of the day. Of course, we knew that you're gonna expand the game, and here we are sitting talking about something that sounds like real serious business. Conquest of Paradise. That's a really sort of demand. It's demands respect, that title.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what we really wanted to do is that, it's a global game, right, where you can play as any country in the world, but we really wanted to take an aspect that we really felt could be stronger and make it even better, and that's like the exploration and the colonial gameplay. Because for me, one of the fun factors of the game is the fact that you sail your navy across the ocean and you discover new lands. But the thing is that you already know what the lands look like. Columbus, he sailed out and he knew, he sort of didn't know what to expect. He thought he would sail around the world and find India. Instead, he found a completely new continent, and we want to give the player more of that feeling. So we have this kind of optional feature that you can turn on when you start the game that will make that happen. As you sail over to find America, you won't find America. Will find something completely different. Atlantis, without the magicians and the fantasy stuff.
So how random is this? Can you just end up with a small little island, or like a big massive continent just of mountains, or how random how much random is it?
There is no technical limit really to how random we can make it, but there is a certain amount of. At the moment we have a map that is a certain area of the map where North and South America is, that is being randomized. But then exactly how random we want to make it is more of a balance issue. Once we go into testing, we will sort of try to figure out how fun is it if you can sail out there and find nothing. Maybe that isn't so fun. So exactly how random
it would be a surprise.
It would be a surprise, but maybe it will ruin your game. But I think that in theory we could do it. It could be just small islands or just one massive mountain in the whole thing. But I think we want to balance it so that the player will find something worth conquering at least.
It sounds like it adds of course, this great replay value because you want to start out with different nations and all that, but it sort of adds replay value as well in a different way than perhaps what would be the case with the core game.
Yeah, the replayability in the Europa Universalis IV is already great because you can take all these different countries and it changes your game.
And it never sort of progresses in the same way twice.
Exactly, and now it becomes even more like that because especially the nations on the Atlantic seaboard, they know what to expect. If you're England, you know sort of how far it is to America. So if you want to choose a colonial strategy, you know how much you have to research what you're going to do, and you know fairly well when it's safe and which direction to send out. But if you have the random new world, it's sort of up in the air. If you're lucky, you can actually find a much shorter, earlier route to the colonial game and get a head start on the Spanish or the Portuguese. Or maybe it's the other way around. You don't really know. So basically you have to adjust your strategy for the unknown. And it also, if you're playing multiplayer, for example, it gives you an interesting extra dimension to your strategy when you have to figure out as a colonial nation or as England or Spain, for example, when I'm fighting against France and Austria and these kind of nations on the continent, maybe I could give up continental possessions, but I'm not really sure what I'm going to get for those. So it will completely change the game. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. You made an interesting point there with multiplayer. That is really interesting, especially like because you sort of take things into consideration that certain countries will have sort of a possible path for them, but Yeah.
We have a multiplayer game going in the office on Tuesdays where we're like 20 people, and these things tends to be very, very competitive. And if you take our latest game, the colonial players, some of them at least, have already from the start of the game figured out that, okay, I'm gonna skip the European continent, I'm gonna optimize for these factors and these ideas and these technologies, and I'm gonna go over to that province and get a head start. And when we sort of change this up, you don't really know, right? You can't really, just as you can't really be sure how the other nations develop, you also can't really be sure what to find. So there is, at the moment, it's really like, if you choose the colonial strategy, you basically find the unknown world, the new world, and you know where it is. And there's, if you just get there ahead of everyone else, there is no really competition. But if you go into the continent, there is player wars and dangerous things. But we just made that strategy a little bit unsafer.
But like you said, but it will also perhaps even more sort of reveal what kind of player you are, if you're conservative or if you're very daring and sort of high risk taking. Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, like I said, like the way the game is at the moment is the sense that the colonial strategy is a little bit, in a multiplayer game, it's a little bit less risk taking, because the most dangerous thing you can do in a multiplayer game is fight the other players. So quite a lot of people wants to capture AI countries first or go into the colonies. And now we just upped the risk level a little bit, increased it slightly for the colonial players. So it's going to be interesting to see what that does with the multiplayer dynamics.
Sort of in terms of the other mechanics, I guess you're also revisiting all the colonial stuff and that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what we wanted to do with this, we wanted to look at the whole. The focus for this expansion is going to be the colonial aspect in North America. And one thing we wanted to do, for example, is we wanted it to be more interesting to play the people that actually already live in North America when the Europeans arrive. Because, I mean, you can play as any nation in the world in Europa Universalis IV, but the thing is that we need to focus the game design somewhere, and it's focused in Europe. And that means that you have a certain technology progression, for example, and certain buildings you can build and ideas you can take that for the Europeans are optimized so that you get one every once in a while, so you get a good pacing in the game. But that means basically that it can be for some, for example, Native American tribes can have this kind of thing where they have to wait 100 years before they can get one technology. So what we're doing here instead is actually adding more specific content for the nations in North America, so they actually get like specific buildings or specific ideas and technologies that are gonna make a very interesting gameplay for the Native Americans in North America up until the point where they can sort of either meet the Europeans and see if they can sort of
stand their ground.
Yeah, stand their ground, or if they lose, sort of. And we have some interesting mechanics that we're gonna talk about later. That's gonna be make it sort of like that you can play North American tribe and have your own little game where you compete against the other tribes, but also try to be prepared in case foreign invaders happen.
Inoculate yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So we have that idea though.
That should be like at the top of the tech tree for.
Yeah, I think inoculation, unfortunately, is like in the 19th century or something.
You have to wait. You have to hope that it takes really long time for the colonization.
Yeah, or you just have to dig in the mountains somewhere, or make sure you killed all the competition before Europeans come.
Or maybe just go to El Dorado, because you never found that. Right?
Definitely.
So we're actually talking about this before it's sort of fully official. But when can we expect to see Conquest of Paradise?
We're aiming for release towards the end of the year, December somewhere.
And in terms of continuing with expansions, is it going to be similar to what you've done with Crusader Kings 2? Yeah,
I mean the way we used for Crusader Kings 2 really suited us and worked really well for us, because we've already always had this kind of thing where we keep working on our games long after they're released. And back in the old days with like Hearts of Iron 2 and these games, it was more almost like I'm working on this game, but then I'm gonna spend some time fixing the other one because I want to. And then we started to do like the expansions for EU3 and these kind of things, which was more like we collected fixes, and eventually we said that, hey, we can make a project out of this. And this has morphed sort of into the way we work with CK2 and Europa EU4 at the moment, in the sense that we don't really have to drop a project once it's done. We have we make the best game we can make, but then we have we keep the team on the game. We make free updates and we make expansions, and because you worked on a game for 18 months, right? And even if you made it you have a design vision and you make it the way you want to, once you get there and you play test enough and you play a lot of multiplayer games and these kind of things, you realize that, oh, if I had 6 more months, I would change this thing or add this thing or improve this thing. And now with this new strategy, you actually can do that. So basically the core team that made EU4 is still actually working on the game, we've never stopped doing it. So that works really good for us.
And you'll be working on it for years and years, hopefully.
As long as people continues to want to play it. And I mean, people are still playing Crusader Kings 2, and I really think that people will continue to play EU4 for years to come. I mean, people played EU3 until we released EU4. So
yeah, and there was quite a gap between those two.
Yeah, I don't remember now, but it was 6 years or something.
Do you have any ideas of other areas that you'd like to revisit in a similar way to colonization, or?
Yeah. For this expansion, we're also looking at, because once you find America, right, there is the Native Americans who actually live there already, but then you have also the colonial nations that come, because I mean the British, for example, built colonies and the Spanish built colonies, but the way communication worked in those days is that it's not really easy to govern those territories. And New England, for example, more or less managed its own affairs, and they got orders from the kings, but they sort of made their own things. So now we have this kind of thing with colonial nations, so that once you have a sizable chunk of colonies in the New World, they will be sort of like a subject country of yours that you can actually play as a player. And they can do limited things. They can fight against the Native Americans, they can fight against other colonies, but their mother country can also come in and help them and then sort of interfere, and also the mother country can demand more money from their colonies, which will sort of piss them off and eventually give you risk of liberation wars and these kind of things. And we have this really cool system where we actually have dynamic names for the colonies, so that depending on which country happens to show up on the eastern US seaboard, you're gonna get New England or New Spain or things like that.
New Amsterdam.
Yeah, New Amsterdam. Or I think that after our multiplayer game, I think Morocco has colonized large parts of South America. Yeah. So for some reason we've also put a lot of research into getting Arabic colonial names, New Al-Andalus and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it does make sense. Morocco could have been colonial power.
At least from the strategic position they have, it probably requires a player who knows
what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. But
how to sort of play the game, how to progress quickly.
But I think that's one of the beauties of EU4 really, is the sort of, it's plausible historical accuracy, right? The game will sort of be like history, but you can change it. You can take a country that didn't historically do well and sort of maneuver around, especially in multiplayer, and sort of maneuver and build your empire in a completely different way, and then history progresses in a sort of different tangent.
Yeah, I guess that's the beauty of any such game, is the sort of the what if scenarios, the sort of things that when you know history, you know that there are so many points in history where things could have gone very differently if just the decisions had been made in another way. And
that also makes sort of like a difficult design point, because in history there is a lot of things that progressed because of bigger factors, right? But then there is also like the unlikely events that change history. And then when you make a game and people think that, oh, why doesn't this country conquer half of Europe? Because they did in history, and that was maybe because some other guy died somewhere, and his son, he didn't have any sons, so nobody inherited that land. And in the game, you take the most likely approach, and you have to sort of balance the things that what happened in history, how can our mechanics do that, and what do we do when history doesn't really follow the logical course. So it's
when history doesn't follow the script.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's the most interesting thing about working with these kind of games is the sense that you're both in the realm of trying to make a historical game and trying to make a fun and balanced game that people want to play even if they don't know very much history. And you have to sort of constantly switch between those, that here we have a good gameplay feature and now it's unbalanced, and then you wonder, okay, but why did France actually stop in reality? And see, can this make a good mechanic? And you sort of bring back and forth from them all the time. That's kind of...
Do you get that feedback a lot from players that like, it doesn't play like it should? Like
it's a big debate, I think, especially on the more hardcore fans that have been around for a long time. It's the fun gameplay stuff versus the historical accuracy stuff, and then people are getting very riled up in this debate.
Yeah. But I guess it's one of those things where you sort of have to satisfy both sides in a way. You can't leave.
Exactly, in a way, because I mean, primarily we make a fun and balanced game. That is our focus thing. But what makes a PDS game what it is its historical bit, right? Yeah. So, and that's why we sort of come to what we call historical plausibility. We want a historical gameplay that it's going to feel plausible, but it doesn't necessarily have to follow the script.
I think that's the end of our script.
All right.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It was very nice talking to you.